For today's Inner Work series, we're going to talk about the archetypes and how you can utilize them in your healing journey. At first, I want to bring forward the archetype as such, the archetype itself, and then let it unfold into the archetype as a representation or the archetype as an image. So to start out, let's understand kind of its birthing, its birth. That way we can really honor the development of it. So the archetype as such it's truly a universal template that is inherent to our psychological functioning. You were born with it. I was born with it. It is a universal template. Universal. And it's kind of the way that we experience life. It's the way that we perceive information, the way we make meaning of life, the way that we organize our thoughts. And it's a solid framework more than anything. If I want to already materialize it, because it is unrepresentable, if I want to already materialize it, I will say that this is a framework. And this framework gives us a very specific structure, a very specific pattern that allows us to make meaning of this existence. So it's kind of a deeper level of our psychological framework, and it has answers. It has a power that we can't really fathom until we consciously choose to work with it, to acknowledge what it is. If I can give you a sense of grounding as you're trying to understand this concept, what helped me is looking at it from the definition of it being an archetype as a pattern of behavior. And when I looked at it from this perspective, I'm naturally an intuitive sensing person. So when I had brought that forward and I felt into, okay, well, what is a pattern? I immediately thought of fragmentation. Fragmentation, pattern of behavior, and then intelligence came forward. So fragmented intelligence, almost just like, I can't even explain it. It's fragmented intelligence. And that's what came to mind. And that is the energy, the system, which is within us. How powerful is that? I had so many questions that came up once I kind of pieced that together, but hopefully that will support you in understanding what an archetype itself is. Now, as it's developed and as it has kind of taken form, as you and I have really materialized this, I want to bring forward a quote from Richard Tarnas. He has a book called Cosmos and Psyche, and I think also like The Western Mind, I believe so. But I want to read you a quote that will help us understand kind of this cosmic perspective, but also it being very human when we choose to extrapolate it to that extent. So Tarnas says, "We can thus conceive of archetypes as possessing a transcendent and a numinous quality, yet simultaneously manifesting in specific, down-to-earth, physical, emotional, and cognitive embodiments." So when he says that it's transcendent and when he says it's numinous and transcendent, it really brings to light that it is a cosmic energy. It is cosmic. And maybe that's why we can't grab the concept of it, right away, because it is something so vast. And it being numinous means that there is an infinite, number of ways to really perceive the energy and to work with the energy. And that there's so many different archetypes. So transcendent and numinous, but as well, he brings forward the fact that we can simultaneously manifest it in a specific down-to-earth physical, emotional, and cognitive embodiment. So what does he mean by manifesting it? And that's where it comes to light that we start to materialize this archetype as a representation. And the way that the archetype is represented is through myths, it's through fairy tales, it's through religion. It is, oh my goodness, it's through symbols and images. An archetype is represented as these specific things. And it's almost like a container for the archetype to be lived through. And the archetype does need to be lived through, but it needs to be contained, in a very strong way as it's being worked with. So that is just an archetype as a representation. Now, if we want to extrapolate it even more and make the archetype into an image, that's where we bring forward the whole list of different archetypes, which is, we can go into goddesses, but within goddesses, we can go to the archetype, the archetype of the goddess, but which goddess do you want to resonate with and work with? Or for male archetypes, you could go to the king, the magician, the warrior, the lover, and here's where I will just bring in the books that hopefully I don't drop them, that I hope that you pick up, because you can utilize both of these, man or woman, choosing either or to work with. I worked with King, Magician, Warrior, Lover all last summer. I fell off my skateboard and my teacher at the time said, hey, please read this book. And I read the whole thing in like 2 days, and there's only like 100 pages, but I worked with all of the archetypes every single day. And I got very familiar with each one of their energy systems and how I could kind of utilize the masculine essence of this king, the masculine essence of the magician, the warrior, and the lover, right? Because there's also a feminine essence to it. If you wanted to work with, the lover, then it would be like Aphrodite. So it depends on who you want to work with, but there is a list. It's not just these, it's also, you can work with the mother or the father as an archetype. And with the mother, do you want to work with Gaia? Do you want to work with the great mother? Do you want to work with your own mother, right? Like, what is your association to this archetype? You could also kind of narrow it down to like the orphan, or you could go into the fool, the virgin, the divine child. You can work with all of these different images that will give you a specific association that, you'll have a certain resonance to that image. But it's also important to know that these images, these archetypes, they have two poles. They have a light and a dark. A light, which is probably why you're drawn to it, and also a dark. And that dark is the psychological, disturbances which they have. And I'll actually open up Goddess in Every One and go to page, if you have this book, page 302, and it talks about the psychological difficulties. So I'll just take Demeter, for example. So she is the mother to Persephone, but she is she is all love, but she is very much like mama bear protector. And so her strengths are ability to be maternal and nurturing of others. She has generosity, but her psychological difficulties is depression, burnout, fostering dependency, unplanned pregnancy. So being mindful, the fact that these archetypes, which you choose to work with, they have a light and a dark pole. And it's important to know that as you're working with them, you're taking on all qualities of this. Actually, you choose which qualities you take on. Let me reframe that. You choose which qualities you take on, and you're also mindful of how it affects you and how it affects your external reality. It's your responsibility to do that. So I would love to invite you to do a homework assignment with me for this week, and that way you'll be held accountable. You can let me know how this worked for you, how you connected with these archetypes. So this assignment requires just 4 simple things. The first one is to choose your archetype. Do your research, choose your archetype. Second thing, make sure that you're bringing awareness to the light and the dark poles of these archetypes. Third thing, set an intention. How do you want to work with them? How are you going to bring them into your everyday life? What is your intention in bringing forth this very, godlike energy into your reality and restructuring your framework, and you're living through them. So what is your intention for doing all of this? The last thing is to meet them. Spend 1 hour a day in active imagination and connect with them. If you don't know what active imagination is, I'll link my video so you can understand what that looks like, or you can do your own research on it. But I hope that you gained something from this video. This was a lot of fun for me, and I will see you in my next video. We're going to talk about voice dialogue and talking to all the different parts with Hellstone, Hell, and Sidra Stone. So I will see you in my next video.